I saw the movie last night. Congratulations.
Thank you.
It is great. It's emotional but enjoyable and very authentic.
Thank you.
What I really enjoyed about it, I have a background in music. The bands that you cover and you talk about in this movie, the 5 particular bands, The Clash, Television, Gang of Four, Buzzcocks. What kind of personal connection do you have with these bands, or are these just bands that you feel like the next generation should look into or should, you know, immerse themselves with?
Well, in thinking about, you know, the story of, the music is like the 5th character in the movie. And I think that in thinking about the history of music as it related to the father, you know, what Chris and I talked about a lot was this idea that Jerry would come home and he would go up to his study and he would lock the door and he would listen to all this music. And Sam, who so desperately wanted to be on the other side of the door, would be actually sitting outside hearing. So everything he learned about music, he learned through the door. And, you know, Jerry, you know, as you see from the record collection, it's like this unbelievable spectrum of sound. And I felt like in a movie about music, if the music of the film didn't speak authentically to that, it would be a total failure. So, you know, as far as like the punk that you're referring to, you know, I felt like Sam probably would have gravitated toward that music, particularly out of anger for his dad, you know, and he also would have been the kind of guy who, like his father, would have said, you need to listen to it in this order. You can't start here, and you know, it's got to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You know, and those bands were sort of the introduction to that sound. You know, that if you're going to bring them to virgin ears, here's how you need to listen to them. You know. And I loved that, and I loved being able to write that. And, you know, Jody, who wrote the movie with me, his dad was a record producer and a songwriter. And so we felt like we really wanted to bring an authentic musical point of view to the movie.
I was also really excited because Rhino Records, I grew up just 5 or 10 minutes away.
Oh, really?
So when it popped up on screen, I was very excited that you guys chose that. Usually people do Amoeba or something a little bit more in Los Angeles.
Yeah, Rhino, you know, there was a Rhino that used to be on Westwood Boulevard that I grew up with, and I loved that record store. So I felt so much like the LA of the movie that I wanted to represent was the LA that you don't see on film a lot. You know, I think people who live in Los Angeles and who grow up here, it's about small spaces that you make for yourself in places like Rhino Records or Henry's Tacos. That's
my next question. So Los Angeles, well known for their Mexican food. What made you particularly choose Henry's out of all the taco stands?
I have to give that to Chris Pine, frankly, because I said, you know, so we have this scene that I really love, and I want it to be at a place that means something to you. What's your favorite? And he said Henry's Tacos. You know,
that's amazing.
So I went and I looked at Henry's and was like, this is the most perfect place to put this scene. So it's all Chris Pine.
That's great. So the chemistry between the two leads is obviously it's massive, but in dealing with how you're directing Chris, particularly since he is cognizant of the relationship between the two, but Elizabeth Banks' character isn't.
Yeah.
Did you ask him to tone down like particular facial expressions or like smiles or like any sort of like affectionate kind of looks, because he's cognizant, but obviously she's not, so she's getting more flirty. Like, how did you direct him to make sure it wasn't too romantic?
Well, you know, the thing about Sam's character is that he's a guy who has grown up in a house of lies, and so as a result, his default in life is to lie. That's his way out of a problem every time. So part of what was really interesting to me was what happens when a character who lives in that space is suddenly presented with this, you know, very complicated moral choice. Is it going to redeem him or is it going to destroy him, you know? And I think that in order to function that way and to live that way, you have to be in a certain amount of denial about certain things. And really what's happening for him over the course of the movie is that he's spent his whole life running from his family, and for the first time in his life he's met somebody who at a DNA level understands what it means to be the son of that man. And he is meeting somebody who he's connecting to as a sibling. And it's like it's almost like it's like oxygen for him. He's just never had it before, you know, and he wants it. And what's happening is he doesn't mean to lie to her at the beginning. It happens because he's sort of in shock and he doesn't really know what to say. But then, because that's the foundation their relationship is built on, suddenly the lie snowballs. And I think that dramatically, that's part of what was really interesting to me was, you know, it's that Hitchcock thing of like, you put the bomb under the chair at the beginning of the scene, and then two people walk in and they have a 20-minute conversation, and all you can think about is get out of the room, you know. And I love that. I thought that was great. So yeah, we talked about it a lot, and we calibrated, both in performance and in editing, how much to show and what we wanted to do. But yeah. Yeah,
because it was obviously sweet, but so it's a collaborative effort with you, Jody, and Bob, and I'm sure you talked about it with Chris a lot and Elizabeth. But the 6 rules, is that something particularly that comes from you three, or was it something you all talked about that generally everyone should kind of look out for, or how did those 6 things come about?
It's so funny because that's one of the most asked questions that we get is about the 6 rules.
They were great. Like, I was taking notes during the movie, and I was like, oh my god, I'm sure this is for an 11-year-old boy, but it totally works for me.
Oh, that's good. Well, then I guess it worked. The truth is that no one's ever told me 6 rules, and we didn't sort of set out and have a broad conversation about it. It was honestly more that, it took 8 years for us to write the movie. And at a certain point, the characters really start speaking to you, and I mean, that's just like, it's like self-imposed schizophrenia, because really it's just coming from your mind. But I think at that point, that scene is about so many things. That scene is about, Sam has seen these rules on his father's wall for his whole life, and because he was kind of rejected by his dad, he rejected the rules. He wasn't willing to listen to anything his dad had to say. But once he starts translating them, he starts to realize that maybe they meant something way different than he thought. And he's hearing them in some ways for the first time, and as he's hearing them for the first time, he's passing them down to Josh, and really what's happening is a father is speaking to a son who's speaking to a grandson, and so this wisdom is coming down between generations. And, if the truth is, if I had thought too hard about the rules, I don't think I would have been able to write them. They just kind of came out, and we all wrote them, and it was a collective effort.
The one that spoke to me... Oh, okay, last question. Do you feel like this movie was a labor of love, considering your personal ties?
Absolutely. I mean, we wrote it for no money and nobody but ourselves over the course of 8 years. You know what I mean? So it was like trekking through the desert a lot of the time.
Do you think it's going to be hard to kind of let go of these characters now that they're fully fleshed out?
That's a great question. I think these characters will always be a part of me in a huge way. I fell so in love with all of them. And it's weird, actually, after all this time, sort of nurturing them, to now give them to you, you know what I mean, and have this conversation with you about it. And yeah, it'll be hard, but I also feel like it's part of the cycle of things, and that it's okay now. Now it's time for them to go out into the world and for other people, for them to belong to other people,